Hello everyone, it's me again, Joseph, your host, and welcome back to Catechism for Kids. Today, we're going to travel back in time, over 1,000 years ago, to meet a very special and very brave Pope. His name is Pope St. Nicholas I, and he's so important that he's one of only 3 popes in history to be called the Great. Have you ever wondered what makes someone truly great? Is it being rich, or powerful, or famous? Well, the story of Pope Nicholas shows us that real greatness comes from courage, justice, and listening to God's voice above all others. His feast day is November 13th, so let's get ready to learn about this amazing shepherd of the Church. So, who was this Nicholas? He was born around the year 800 in Rome to a good and well-known family. Even as a young boy, he was known for being very smart, kind, and deeply devoted to his faith. He loved learning, and he loved the Church. It was clear to everyone that he had a special calling from God. He started serving the Church when he was young, first as a subdeacon and then as a deacon. Think of these as important helper roles for the Pope. Because he was so wise and capable, people really looked up to him. Then, in the year 858, the time came to choose a new Pope. And guess who they chose? That's right, Nicholas. He was elected Pope on April 24, 858. Now, being Pope back then was an incredibly tough job. Europe was a messy place. There were kings and emperors constantly fighting for power. And dangers from outside forces like Viking raiders and Muslim armies. The Church itself was facing many challenges from within, with some powerful people trying to bend the rules to suit themselves. But Pope Nicholas wasn't afraid. He believed with all his heart that the Pope's job was to be a firm and loving father to all Christians, protecting God's law and guiding the flock. He saw himself as a shepherd, just like Jesus, the Good Shepherd. One of the first things that made Pope Nicholas famous was his incredible courage in standing up to a powerful king. This king's name was Lothair II. King Lothair was married to a queen named Teutberga, but he decided he didn't want to be married to her anymore. He wanted to divorce her so he could marry another woman he liked better, named Waldrada. Now, the Church has always taught that marriage is a sacred promise. It's a covenant before God that cannot be broken just because you change your mind. But King Lothair didn't care. He was the king, and he thought he could do whatever he wanted. He even got some of his local bishops to agree with him and say the divorce was okay. He sent messengers to Pope Nicholas, expecting him to just give his approval. But Pope Nicholas said no, absolutely not. He declared that the king's divorce was invalid and that Teutberga was his one and only lawful wife. He reminded everyone that God's law applies to everyone, even kings. Well, King Lothair was furious. How dare the Pope defy him? He gathered his army and marched to Rome, surrounding the city. He thought he could scare Pope Nicholas into changing his mind. The Pope had to take refuge in St. Peter's Basilica for 2 whole days while the soldiers were outside. Can you imagine how scary that must have been? Did he give in? No way. He stood firm, praying and trusting in God. He knew that defending the truth and protecting the sacrament of marriage was more important than his own safety. In the end, the king's own emperor realized this was wrong and the army left. King Lothair eventually had to accept the Pope's decision and take back his wife, Queen Teutberga. This story sent a powerful message all across Europe. No one, not even a king, is above God's law. Pope Nicholas didn't just stand up to kings. He also made sure that everyone within the Church was following the rules. He was like a good coach who makes sure the whole team is playing fairly and doing their best. For example, there was a very powerful archbishop named John of Ravenna. This archbishop was not being a good shepherd. He was bossing around the other bishops, demanding money, and even throwing priests in jail unjustly. He was acting more like a tyrant than a man of God. Pope Nicholas sent him warnings, but the archbishop ignored them. Finally, the Pope had to excommunicate him, which is a very serious way of saying he was no longer in communion with the Church until he changed his ways. Eventually, after a lot of drama, the archbishop had to admit he was wrong and submit to the Pope's authority. Pope Nicholas showed that the Church needed order and justice, and that the Pope in Rome was the final court of appeal to make sure everyone was treated fairly. But Pope Nicholas wasn't just about rules and discipline. He had a huge heart for spreading the good news of Jesus. He was very enthusiastic about missionary work, sent priests and gave guidance to places like Scandinavia. That's where countries like Denmark and Sweden are, and to the people of Bulgaria, who were just starting to become Christians. The leader of Bulgaria, Khan Boris, wrote to the Pope asking all sorts of questions about how to live as a Christian. He asked about everything from deep theology to simple, everyday things. One of my favorite questions he asked was, "Is it a sin for Christians to wear pants?" Pope Nicholas wrote back with a gentle and wise answer. He said that whether you wear pants or not has nothing to do with your salvation. What really matters, he explained, are the spiritual pants you wear, living a good, virtuous life, and controlling your passions. I just love that. It shows that Pope Nicholas was not only a strong leader, but also a practical and understanding teacher. He also made a couple of decisions that still affect the church today. Have you ever noticed a rooster on top of a church steeple? Well, Pope Nicholas is the one who decreed that churches should have a rooster on them. Why a rooster? To remind us of the story of Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed. It's a symbol that reminds us to always be faithful to Christ and to ask for forgiveness when we fail. He also made a rule that Christians should abstain from meat, which means not eating it, on Wednesdays and Fridays. Over time, this tradition changed, but it's the reason many Catholics still don't eat meat on Fridays, especially during the season of Lent. It's a small sacrifice to remember the great sacrifice Jesus made for us on the cross. Pope Nicholas's strong belief in the Pope's authority as the leader of the whole Church did cause some problems, though. The Church in the East, in places like Constantinople, had a different view. They respected the Pope in Rome, but they didn't believe he had authority over their patriarch. These disagreements led to a lot of tension, and unfortunately, it was one of the steps that led to the big split, or schism, between the Catholic Church in the West and the Orthodox Church in the East. It's a sad part of the story, but it shows how complicated history can be. After a life full of courage, faithfulness, and tireless work for God, Nicholas the Great died on November 13th, 867. He was buried in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. He left behind a church that was stronger, more just, and more confident in its mission. He truly was a great pope, not because of earthly power, but because he was a faithful servant of God and a fearless shepherd for his people. So, what can we learn from Pope St. Nicholas I today? First, we learn that true leadership isn't about being popular or powerful. It's about standing for what is right, even when it's hard. Nicholas stood up to a king to defend the sanctity of marriage. He stood up to a powerful archbishop to defend justice. Can you think of a time when you need to be brave and stand up for what's right, even if your friends disagree? Second, we learn that rules are there to protect us and help us live in harmony and love. Nicholas worked hard to make sure the church was a place of order and fairness, where the weak were protected and everyone was held to the same standard. And finally, we learn that our faith should be part of everything we do. For Nicholas, being pope wasn't just a job. It was his entire life. He loved God, he loved the church, and he spent every ounce of his energy serving them. He shows us that real greatness comes from putting God first in everything. The next time you see a rooster on a church steeple, I hope you'll remember Pope St. Nicholas the Great. Remember his courage, his love for justice, and his deep faith. He is a wonderful example for all of us of what it means to be a true follower of Jesus Christ. Thanks for joining me today for Catechism for Kids. I hope you were inspired by the story of this incredible saint. Don't forget to talk to your parents or teachers if you have more questions. See you next time. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Bye now, and God bless you always.